Hi, I'm Avery and Annah, the communities editor of the Capilano Courier, as well as the writer of The Drug Store and Safe Supply a year post-enactment. I'm here with Anna to discuss Safe Supply in regards to our recent article in the magazine. How's it going, Anna?
Good. Nice to meet you, and
Nice
thanks
to
for
meet you.
having me.
Yeah. Do you want to just introduce yourself a little bit?
My name is Anna Casson, and I'm a psychology student here at CapU.
So maybe do you want to tell us a little bit about the project you've been working on with Safe Supply and how that relates?
Well, I've been quite passionate about it for a while, and I started looking more into it for a class I was taking last term, and wrote a big paper. I think I had, for the first time in my life, 10 pages of references or something insane like that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so that's kind of what got me finding out more about it.
Yeah, and then in terms of the research that you did, was it mostly looking at the statistics across Safe Supply, or was it more case study specific?
It was looking at some statistics. It was looking at, well, it wasn't just Safe Supply, it was the toxic drug crisis in BC. So I can give you a little recap. It's been a public health emergency since 2016. It's now 2024, so it's been a very long time, and the situation has just gotten worse, not recently gotten worse, but is just getting worse. An average of 7 people a day are dying. It's now the leading cause of death for people between the ages of 10 and 59, like leading cause of death in BC, and it affects 250,000 people, so 250,000 people. And the Coroner General, the Chief Coroner, has shown unequivocally that these deaths are not just overdose deaths, they're linked to a toxic drug supply. So the paper was looking into all these different sources and trying to understand what the issue really is, and then trying to see what sort of solutions exist for this problem.
Yeah. So then within looking at solutions, of course, I'm sure Safe Supply was one of the ones that was addressed, but did you find that through your research there was maybe better alternatives to Safe Supply, or did you find Safe Supply to be working well?
Well, Safe Supply works. There's no question about that. People who have access to it and for whom it provides the needs that they have, absolutely, it saves lives. They're able to lead more balanced lives, find jobs. They don't have to spend a good portion of their time figuring out how to fund an addiction. A lot of people, it's understood, will be dependent for the rest of their lives, but that's okay. It improves the quality of their lives. And for some people, it allows them to maybe decide to make some changes or not. Either way, it saves lives and it improves quality of lives. So it is available to some extent in Vancouver, in BC. I think you'll have to fact check this, but the last number I heard was probably to 5,000 people, which is great. However, like I said, the crisis affects 250,000 people, so it doesn't even come close to making a big difference. And also, what's provided in our current streams of Safe Supply is limited. So you might be able to get heroin, but people are addicted to many more things than that, including fentanyl, which is just a much stronger opiate, but because it's become so readily available, people are addicted or are looking for that now too. So if you don't have a Safe Supply model that provides people with what they're looking for, they're going to find alternate ways of finding what they need, which is potentially deadly.
Yeah. Through the research I had done, I guess it was last year, and then maybe a couple months ago, I was working closely on the Jerry Martin case. If you maybe looked into that one through your research?
A little bit, but remind me.
I will, for sure. Yeah. That one, I think in terms of understanding Safe Supply, my main focus was on analyzing Jerry Martin's passion, and I talked with him closely, I guess that was a year ago, and we talked a little bit before he had actually ran Safe Supply, ran the Drug Store. So his original plan was, after Safe Supply. Is there another word for Safe Supply? Because I keep saying that, but I'm trying to think of the bill that was passed. Do you remember the word? There was a name for that bill.
Well, there was a decriminalization that happened recently, which is different. Also important, but different. Yeah.
So when decriminalization happened, I think that was sometime January last year, I found Jerry Martin because of the acts that he was doing. I'd found him through, he did quite a few Vice articles. He was in National Geographic. His story had gotten really big, and because he was Vancouver-based, I figured I might have a chance to get to talk to him.
Yeah,
so
and you did.
I did.
That's awesome.
Thank goodness, yeah. So we talked a little bit about his mission in the infancy of it, and then I helped to support the donations for the drugstore and for things like that, which he had created a trailer that was filled with all of these now decriminalized drugs, and they were all tested to be fentanyl free, and then was selling them through that. And I believe it was the first day that it opened that the business was shut down and he was arrested. And then through that, I'd been following the case a little bit, but my article had been out by then, so I kind of left it and moved on to other pieces. And then it was in, I believe, late summer that he had passed away because of a drug overdose, which I believe was fentanyl induced. Yeah. And then after that had happened, I worked on a piece which was kind of, that's the one that just came out, but I was talking, I just worked with the lawyer, and I was able to kind of understand closer what Jerry Martin's passions were and how his journey's been going since then. But I think it's interesting looking at something like this decriminalization and also safe supply from an anecdote case, but then also a statistics case. I felt like through looking just at Jerry Martin's story, I kind of missed some of the stuff that you've been working with.
Well,
interesting.
You got a really important angle of somebody's personal story and lived experience and what they're trying to do about it, which is really important activism. So that's really cool.
It's good, yeah.
And believe me, I don't have all the statistics in my head. And like the whole reason why I care about this is thanks to like stories that I've heard as well. So I think that's a really important side. And statistics are very important, but people, they don't register with people. Human stories are what register with people. So and understanding of both sides and things like that.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. Your story reminds me, the Jerry Martin story though, reminds me of DULF. Have you heard of them?
No.
So we talked about it in our sociology class, and it was also all over the news. It's maybe a little bit more recent. So a couple activists in the downtown east side, similar thing, decided to acquire drugs on the black market and test them and sell them at cost. And apparently they were quite rigorous with their record keeping. So who was receiving this, what were the outcomes, what were the rates of deaths associated, et cetera. They were shut down by the BC government. I think one of them was arrested. And it's really a shame because this was something that was saving lives. And for example, Insight, so the first safe injection site that was in BC, that opened in Vancouver quite a while back. I can't remember the exact date, but they ran illegally for a little while until authorities tried to get involved. But they were able to show their record keeping and say sure, shut us down, but this is what we're doing, and if you shut us down, these people risk dying. And at the time, the government was a little bit more open to this sort of thing, and when they saw the numbers, they were like, okay, well, maybe we can make this legal after all. And so it's thanks to that we now have safe places for people to use drugs. I think they were probably hoping for the same result this time around, and that's not what happened. I looked at this recently, and voter turnout during the last provincial election was 30%, and I feel like the 30% of people who are voting for the elected politicians probably are not on board with these sort of innovative solutions, right?
Yeah, well, that's always the hardest part with getting, I think especially with local legislation, but getting people to start voting when I think we know our biggest voter turnout tends to be the older generations, right? Mm-hmm. And it is hard to, I think, bring people who may be more so social activists in the Vancouver area out into the voting world. I think that disconnect tends to exist, at least I feel like within people like myself. It can be hard to push people to care a lot about the immediate people in charge in Vancouver, whereas I think voter turnout, I'm sure, for provincial elections
is low. Voter turnout is low, and it's hard to, I, for one, have not been involved at all in politics for a good part of my life. sort of ashamed of it, but at the same time I'm not. I think it's really easy for people to feel powerless, to feel like one vote won't make much of a difference, to feel like politics are pretty corrupt, and that even if you get the right people in charge, what difference does it make anyways? And it's only recently that I've started to realize that we have a lot more power than we think. So that's actually something I plan to work on. It's in its infancy right now, but trying to see if we can turn that around a little bit.
Yeah. What made you change to be more interested in politics and take more political action?
Not politics per se, but realizing how vast this crisis is, and how few people have all the decision-making power, and it should be flipped.
Do you feel that there can be some trouble getting students on campus involved in thinking about safe supply and with being knowledgeable on these subjects? Like, do you feel like people are involved here?
I have no idea. Yeah. As I mentioned, I am 40. I'm a lot older than a lot of the students here. So, and I work. I am not as involved with the student population as someone who's normal school age would be. Hopefully that'll change. I love the students here. I find I'm learning a lot, and you guys are a great generation. I'm very optimistic about the future.
I feel like we don't get that a lot. That's good.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, no. Yeah. I'm a millennial, and everyone rolls their eyes at millennials, but I think you guys, you're a lot smarter than we were at your age.
That's good to hear. I feel like people think we're like addicted to our cell phones, but
right.
Nice to hear,
there's the good and the bad, but for the most part, you guys are aware of a lot of issues that we weren't, I think.
That translated in your sociology class you were taking? Did you feel like there were a lot of people who, like, I think it always kind of depends in a classroom environment, but especially with a subject like that, did it feel like a lot of students wanted to raise their hand and talk about the issues that they cared about?
Yeah. There were questions. There were lots of people interested in different issues as well. And then as with anything, there are people who are less interested, right? But yeah, I got interested in it thanks to a podcast called Crackdown. Maybe you've heard of it. Yeah. I was already kind of like intrigued, but I highly recommend it. They do such a great job of telling people's stories and telling it the way it is and what people need. They bring in some stats as well. So that's kind of what got me interested in learning a little bit more and potentially getting involved. I really think I would never shame people into getting more involved in certain things. Like, there are so many issues in the world. There's climate change. There's, like housing, so many things. Like, so whatever you kind of feel like pulls your interest and wherever you think you can make a difference, that's where I think people should head.
Yeah. Was there a reason why you felt this subject you could... And I think it was probably also different because it was in a school environment, but did you feel like this subject in particular held specific importance to you? Was there something that made you personally really drawn to it? Yeah,
it's local, and to me, it's the biggest sort of emergency right now because of the amount of deaths there are. And also the fact that there are some really simple, cost-effective solutions that have been validated by science, that are being proposed by the chief coroner and a wide team of experts that are just being ignored. Yeah. And I think that's a travesty that, all these deaths are going unprevented. They're preventable for political gain.
Yeah. Well, and that they're happening, I think it is so fascinating in Vancouver that these deaths can be happening, and this addiction problem is happening right at the back door of, like, our biggest tourist section, like in Gastown. It's right behind that. Yeah,
we're this beautiful, clean city, and we try to sweep it under the rug.
Yeah. And yet it is, like, it is not only a massive problem within the people, but it's also, like, it's taking up a large part of our city. East Hastings it is so sad what's happening there, and that so many residents, particularly people who don't live anywhere near it or don't really have any specific interest in it, just kind of like to pretend it doesn't exist. Like, I know so many... I think also thinking about young people, as much as we can be really politically active and we can be really interested, there are so many of us that choose to just kind of pretend that area of Vancouver doesn't exist. And I know so many people who never go down there and never, like, want to think about it or talk about it, but
Yeah.
I think it is an integral part of being a person in Vancouver. If you want to live in the city, I feel like I think that is true. There are a lot of issues and you have to, pick your battles. You can't tackle everything, but I think it's something to be aware of if you live in Vancouver. But, yeah.
Totally, yeah. I just started volunteering down there at Carnegie Center, which is like on Hastings and Main, and it's amazing. It's
Really?
so cool. Yeah, it's a little bit different. So I help out in a community center in the learning center, so it's a little bit quieter. I'm not in the hecticness of it all, but it's a really vibrant community, and there's so much going on. There's a lot of activism, which is exciting, and all that stuff. So. Yeah, and I think there's probably a perception, especially with like students who aren't from here, that it's dangerous, right?
Yeah.
And of course it can be, and I think it's probably way more dangerous for people who live there than for someone just passing through. But I can see how somebody might want to avoid going there because it's not, it's not something we're used to seeing.
It's understandable, and there's also, I think you have to, that's such an interesting area because especially if we look at that disconnect between Gastown and East Hastings itself, where you are one street up, there's like a massive drug crisis happening right on the sidewalk, and then beside you there's like a vintage store and there's like $500 boots and like
furniture.
And so I think it can be easy to just stay on like the Gastown side and kind of just pretend that doesn't exist, but at the same time, like I think it also really isn't our place to be like, I don't know. I always feel like I'm kind of doing something wrong by like shopping in those areas that are like right beside, like I'm participating in active gentrification, but I think it's a complicated issue.
It is a complicated issue, and you can't businesses are trying to survive too, like we're all trying to survive, right?
Yeah, Vancouver's really expensive. We're all just trying to make it through.
Yeah.
So then in terms of solutions, like you were saying with the corner, is it safe supply, which tends to be the number one solution that can be the most effective, or are there other solutions?
I think there are many solutions, and they're all very important. The thing about safe supply is that it would be fast. It would be immediate, right? The deaths would stop right away. But then addiction is such a layered issue. It's like very linked to housing. If you don't have a safe place to sleep and have belongings, how can you expect to, go through the difficult task of like maybe weaning yourself off of certain drugs? Or that's just one example. But actually, the new model that was presented in November by the chief coroner and her team is a non-prescriber safe supply model.
I've never heard of non-prescriber.
Where you wouldn't need to go through the healthcare system. So another issue we have in Vancouver, in Canada, is in BC, a very strained healthcare system, right? It's hard to find a doctor. It's hard to, like, emergency room wait lists.
Wait times are insane,
Insane. So this non-prescriber model would allow for people to get the safe supply that they need without a prescription from a doctor. And this is important not only because of the issues going on within Vancouver, but also because of the issues going on in smaller communities, including Indigenous communities and all that. So it would allow the safe supply to be available to people who need it the most. That actually, so it came out in a report on November 1st, and the very same day that report was denied by the BC government, saying that they will continue basically with what they've been doing up until now, which clearly is not working. They keep funding it, which is good, but it's not working. But they flat out said that they would not consider a non-prescriber model of safe supply. The other issue that's important is providing people with the drugs that they need, not just this like limited amount.
So then what about decriminalization? In the state that it's at right now, where do you feel like things are working and where do you feel like things are not working and need big improvement?
So this isn't my opinion. This is based on things that I've heard from other people. But decriminalization is really important for the destigmatization of drug users. It's important so that they're not constantly living in fear of whether they're going to be arrested or not. fear of whether you can just walk down the street or whatever. Actually, apparently, even the reselling of small amounts just kind of helps people get by so that they're not doing things that are even more illegal or detrimental to their own lives. And there's a whole bunch of other reasons for decriminalization too. So it's great that that happened. I think some people would want more. They probably think that it's not enough. But what's happened recently is that criminalization was reintroduced in public spaces. So there are a whole bunch of areas now that you're just not allowed to consume or have drugs. And that's just made it very dangerous again, because along with that, safe supply centers have not increased. So people have nowhere to go. And when you have nowhere to go, you're going to end up somewhere that may be more dangerous, or using at home alone. And that is one of the most dangerous things as well, because if no one is there to see that you're overdosing, no one's there to save you. So it was one step in the right direction with decriminalization, but then a whole lot of it got taken away. And now,
Yeah. So then what do you think of initiatives, which I guess both of those now would be past tense, but initiatives like what Jerry Martin or like what DULF had been doing? Did you find that they were productive ideas, or would you say something like a drugstore, like what Jerry Martin was doing, maybe would have been regressive in terms of getting people actually into a...
I don't think it's regressive at all.
Okay.
Yeah, he was trying to save lives, and people are going to use anyways, so might as well use something that's safe. No, I think that was a great idea. And I'll quote again the chief coroner, Lisa Lapointe, who is actually retiring, saying that, she's very disappointed that she wasn't able to create more of a change in this political environment. However, when asked the same question about these stores, about DULF and all of that, she said, if you were to see someone in a burning building, you may feel justified breaking a window.
Mm-hmm. That would be such a hard job to have. I understand the want to retirement, I understand wanting to retire out of that position. I think that must have been a really difficult spot to be in. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you find out why people are dying, and then you come up with solutions to stop those deaths, and they fall on deaf ears.
Yeah.
It's like, I understand why it's so controversial and why people are so against these measures. They may not have a full understanding of the situation. They may not realize also that the situation as it is far more expensive to the healthcare system than the solutions that are proposed.
Yeah.
That once people start leading stable lives, then, the difficulties we see in the downtown east side may stop being so obvious, The other solutions are really important as well, around social systems and housing and things like that, but they take more time. But they are hugely important, so everything needs to work together all at once.
Yeah. Would you say that there are things that journalists and public media can do within Vancouver and Greater Canada to maybe promote the word of how safe supply can really be effective? Do you feel like you're seeing that within news outlets?
I tend to listen to my little echo chamber, so I feel like they're doing a really good job, and I don't read the journalists or listen to the journalists who are on the other side. So I'm sure there's a ton of backlash. I don't know about it, but
okay.
I feel like the ones that I do listen to are doing a pretty good job.
Yeah.
Of course, any cause will say, do more, but,
Yeah, but it's also understanding the specifics of what a person should be able to do. I think that's always difficult, right? Like I think from a journalist perspective or working in media, it can be hard to find specific things to advertise to your readers in terms of what they can do, and more so than just like be knowledgeable on the subject and like at least try to understand things. But
that's a really good question, and maybe I can get back to you another time. But it's great that, because you are the media, it's great that you guys have interest in this, and getting the word out is important for sure.
I think so. As long as you're doing things from a fact perspective, and like we were talking about, anecdote can be incredibly useful, and I think the subject of someone like Jerry Martin can get people interested in in talking about safe supply so much more than, like you were saying, pure statistics. I think in order to separate the barrier, particularly in media around safe supply of, well, because I feel like I tend to fall into a similar echo chamber, and as do most people, right? But I think it can be hard feeling like you have all the facts when you're on one side and you're like, well, my side is giving me things that I feel are correct, but also like there's a side completely opposite
super
from
hard.
me.
Yeah,
it can be really difficult to decipher what I think is really the truth in this, and particularly when talking about drugs where there's such a biases and there's such prejudice on the subject. So I guess the best thing that a journalist or a writer can do is just try to be completely objective, provide all the facts, and hope that gains an audience.
Yeah. And and I think I would add, I think we were talking earlier about how some people kind of vilify people living with addiction, right? Or people who use drugs in general, saying, well, you made a choice, now you have to pay for it, and don't realize, how layered addiction actually is, or drug use is, all the things that go into it. And there is like I don't even want to say extreme right, but there are people who say like, well, it doesn't matter, they made their choices and it's not up to us to fix that problem. I really operate from a place that I believe in all situations. An organism, a city, a group of people operates at its best, what are the words, is only as strong as its weakest link.
Yeah,
right?
I think we need to continue with that perspective sometimes, because that is true. And I think in terms of at least thinking about journalism and media, the weakest link at times can be people who are the most uneducated on a subject, or who are just getting, that's also complicated though, right? Because I think like we all have education coming into discussion on the drug crisis, regardless of what side you're on. I think we get that information on how we see people who use drugs and the world of drugs from a really early age. So they're really, I think at least at like the age of where people are old enough to kind of take time to understand a subject, they're, by the time you get to that point, I think you are already, like, you could say educated on whatever side of prejudice or bias that you hold. So that's interesting. Like, in terms of then, what would you say, that's a complicated question, but I was going to ask about the weakest link analogy when thinking about the drug crisis, if you could be more specific on that.
Well, that right now our city is hurting.
Yeah.
And there's a whole bunch of people who are not and are satisfied continue living their lives, like just ignoring the issue. Mm-hmm. But imagine if all of these people who are hurting could be like contributors to society.
Yeah.
Could have jobs, could live in respectable places. That would improve the city that you live in, you person up here who doesn't care about, who's had a very easy life, who doesn't care about what goes on down there. You don't live on an island, like you're part of this larger system, and when the system is better, you are also better.
Yeah. It becomes, I think that is the same thing I was kind of thinking about earlier with, if you want to exist in the city of Vancouver, particularly as one of those people who say like you live in like, it's such a like fake stereotype, but say you're a person who like lives in the West End or in Kitsilano. And
I live in the West End.
I want to live in the West End so bad. That's my dream.
But I've been there for 11 years, so my rent is very cheap.
I want to ask you about that earlier because I'm moving to, okay, anyway. But I think though, there's also a misconception with people like that because, I mean, obviously, like, you're a very good example. You're a person who, but I think we get kind of this idea, at least like people I know who live in the east side of Vancouver, even if it's not like whatever, I think there's a misconception that's built that you either are like a super huge activist on the subject or you live in like a richer area and you have like no interest in it.
Yeah.
But that's not how people work. Like I think, of course, there are people like that on either side of the spectrum, but generally, I mean, in order to live in the city, you have to know this is something that's going on and you have to have an opinion on it either way. But I don't think that there's many people in the city who are really able to just fully, completely ignore the issue. I think having an opinion on it is an integral part of being someone in Vancouver, but that's just what I think.
Totally.
Yeah.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah. We can't put the blinders on forever.
You can't. As much as I think people try, and it's a lot easier to, it is impossible. Yeah. So, okay, then on a final note, is there any work you think that students can do, or any messages that maybe, as someone who's done a lot of research on this subject, you can relay to students who are part of the Capilano community and as extended a part of the Vancouver community?
I guess I would just say for now, be safe. You know, it is the leading cause of death for people between the ages of 10 and 59. So, I would kind of like emphasize that. And keep on getting involved with things that you're interested in, things where you feel like you connect with people and that matter to you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And try to, enjoy non-biased news if you can. Facts are great. We love facts.
Absolutely.
Yeah, totally. Well, thank you so much for sitting down and talking to us about this.
Thank you.
Really good. Yeah.